Whilst child abuse may be committed behind closed doors, it should never be swept under the carpet. Good evening and welcome. This is Face the Nation. Our topic of discussion today is child abuse, safeguarding our future. Joining us this evening on the show are Arutha Wickramasinghe, Equality Director, I Pro Bono. Also joining us tonight on the show is Attorney at Law Milani Salpitikorala, Child Protection Force, Professor Atula Sumadipala, Chairman of the National Institute of Fundamental Studies, as well as Professor Pratibha Mahanamheva, Human Rights Educator. Let's start off tonight's show with Professor Atula Sumadipala. Professor, give us an introduction to what abuse is all about. Define what it is.
So when you actually invited, I gave a hard thought even to agree. I think even though we are confined to discussing child abuse today, to me, abuse, the big picture would have been more important, because in my opinion, it's everywhere. It's at home, it's in school, it's in society, it's everywhere. It's hard to talk about child abuse ignoring the context. So therefore, let me first explain what we mean by abuse. I went through some definitions. One says some form of a bad purpose or misuse, which is not good enough. Treat with cruelty, regularly or repeatedly, again to me not good enough. Improper use of something, power or authority, again I think it's not a proper definition. Cruelty or violence treated by a person against a person or animal. So to me, none of those are good enough, as abuse can come in subtle forms, very overt forms, or covert forms. It's everywhere. So therefore, I actually thought hard about it, and I think it starts with abuse at the highest level, political abuse, abuse in every way. It's intimately linked with power, authority, and also linked to vulnerability. And the types of abuse could be neglect, which is finance or material form. It's not only child, it could be elderly abuse or vulnerable woman. Then corporal punishment, which happens at schools and homes, again physical nature. And there could be emotional or psychological abuse, which also can come in the form of ragging, cruel ragging in universities. Then one form is sexual abuse, yes, and modern slavery. Organizational or institutional abuse. So some of the kids who get abused at home, they are taken to institutions and get abused again. And on top of that, I think the latest form of abuse is cyberbullying. So let me put all these in together and tell you that it's everywhere. And unfortunately, we are a nation who is always reactive. We are not proactive. Certain forms of abuse come in waves. We talk about it, and after some time it gets died down. Except for the COVID waves, I think all the other waves have died down very easily. So my appeal to you is, let's not confine this discussion to this particular event today. But as this lady mentioned before we started, it has to be a social movement. We'll talk about it later.
So, Professor, before shifting gears to the other speakers, what is the reason behind all this? Now, when we take a look at the last 1.5 years to 2 years, the number of child abuse cases or abuse cases in the country has gone up drastically. Is it because of COVID?
No, I don't think so. I mean, it's very difficult to boil it down to one particular reason. Some people may be comfortable to talk about the mentality of the perpetrator and stop there. I think it's a social disease to me. It starts from lack of awareness, the education system. That's why at the very beginning said it has to come in context. So you can't take sexual abuse or child abuse without context. As we know, abuse is there in every form, and it's only the form which changes. And we talk about these things very easy when something comes up. When the law is not enforced equally, when people are not in equal forms, when people don't have the power to talk, In other words, when they become vulnerable, these things happen. So I don't think there's an easy solution for it. But in my opinion, whatever it is, when it comes to abuse, the slogan, my slogan is zero tolerance.
Isn't the reason being reactive and not proactive on cases like abuse?
Absolutely. That's why I said we are not a proactive nation. We actually deal with the things after it happens.
Right.
But even within our education, as a social movement, there are no preventive measures within our education system. You know, it's not there. So that's what the reason. First 3,000 days of a child is very important in terms of childhood development. Right from the day, what we do is, the great majority of people, tell the child how to do things, do it, then child becomes, in a way, you know, powerless. They don't have a choice, they don't have opinion, they are told. And in fact, you know, there are two concepts. I actually spoke to quite a few people. I generally, when I come to this type of discussions, I speak to my colleagues, people in authority. One said there is a concept called helicopter parenting, where, you know, parents try to, you know, like a helicopter watch around children. The other one is a tiger parenting, where the parents try to get everything done which they couldn't do. So they are, in a way, right from the beginning, treated, and, you know, things are imposed on them, so they have to, you know, be obedient. They have to accept it. So this is one of the reasons why, to answer to your last question, I think it's more reported now because of the awareness raising.
Right.
And it's, I think, the tip of the iceberg.
Thank you very much, Professor Athura Sumantipala, Chairman of the National Institute of Fundamental Studies. I now move my attention to Attorney at Law Milani Salpitikorala from the Child Protection Force. Milani, interestingly, we are talking about child abuse now because of the latest incident that happened in Sri Lanka involving a one-time strong minister in the government ranks. We're talking about abuse, we're talking about child abuse, we're talking about the age limit as far as child labor is concerned. Give us an overall picture as to what is the age limit for a child to start working as a domestic worker at a house, because based on my knowledge, the age limit stood at 14, and in 2021 it was lifted to 16. Now it stands at 16 and above, and now the Child Protection Authority is working towards making sure that number is also lifted to 18. Correct me if I'm wrong on this?
Yes.
Right.
So this is the thing, right? The universal standard of the age of adulthood is 18, and obviously there's a reason for it. The psychological development of the child and various other reasons for the age of adulthood to be 18. But in our laws, so we have the age of adulthood ordinance, which says 18 is the age of adulthood. But in lots of other laws, say for example the adoption laws, it says a child can be adopted. So basically the law is for a child below the age of 14. So then what happens to the rest of the children who are in childcare institutions from 14 to 18? They don't come under the purview of the adoption laws. So likewise the labor laws, the age of children who can work is 16. But if you walk on the streets of Peta, on a very random day, you'll see how many young children aged 12, 14 are working in shops as laborers without proper places to sleep, without proper food, proper wages, and so on. This also happens because of, through experience. This happens because when life gets difficult, let's say in the estate communities, right? These are most of the kids who come into PETA. They just find money for the bus ticket to come into PETA, and they come to PETA, and that is when they look for employment. And because of the fact that there is no law or anything monitoring for them to be paid, there are no EPF, ETF, nothing. So these children can be employed for very low wages. So there is a lot of young children working in such places which are not monitored, and sometimes it's also difficult for the one authority, the police, to keep monitoring say, every single shop within an area to see if there are young children. So they would also go there to investigate if somebody calls and complains about it. So I strongly feel that it should be 18 all around with all our laws. And yeah.
Milani, what is the reason behind all this? Because as a nation, we are talking about child abuse now, as I said before, because of the recent incident that took place involving a 16-year-old domestic worker. But shouldn't we as a nation talk about this, as Professor Atula mentioned, as a movement? And this has to come from NGOs like your organizations and more. Civic rights organizations have a bigger role to play, including the media. I'm not saying no. But where must it start? Where must this movement really start, Milani, in your opinion?
I think it starts with each of us. I think every adult of Sri Lanka has a responsibility to talk about it, to create that awareness. And also, I personally believe in very peaceful awareness, you know, without trying to fight with the rest of the world and the rest of the communities, where you peacefully make people aware. I can tell you with a great load of responsibility that there are many people, even within Colombo, who are absolutely unaware of child abuse, of the fact that this can happen within the home, and also the fact that child abuse is not only sexual abuse, but a lot of other things. So I think it is the responsibility of each one of us, and also that media plays a massive role in Sri Lanka, because I think a lot of Sri Lankans are stuck on messages that the media sends out. So, I mean, this is something that I really wanted to put out today as well. If media can go into constructive awareness rather than holding on one particular case and, you know, putting out all the details, because one thing is that is extremely dangerous for the victim, because say, for example, the victim has to, right now is in protective custody and probably in a hospital or a psychiatric unit and getting treated. But one day, the victim has to come out and reintegrate into society, right? Is going to come out known as the child who was raped or the child who was, you know, something happened. So it is going to be very difficult for him or her to build up that, to get back into society, to, you know, walk around like you and I. But this is what media should try to minimize and probably talk about constructive awareness to make people aware, you know, things like positive parenting, body safety rules, early childhood education, and,
Right.
you know, emotional intelligence and so on.
Thank you very much, Attorney at Law Milani Salpirikorala. We now move our attention to Professor Pratibha Mahanamheva, human rights educator. Usually we have Professor Pratibha Mahanamheva talking about politics, but today wearing a different hat altogether in terms of our topic today, child abuse, safeguarding our future. Professor, interestingly, Sri Lanka brought in the necessary laws to protect a child in the year 1991. If you recollect right, the Convention on the Rights of the Child was brought in the year 1990. As a result of that, Sri Lanka adopted that resolution at the UN General Assembly, and we implemented those laws in Sri Lanka in the year 1991. However, several decades down the line, we are still talking about the rights of the child. What is the reason behind this? Is it because we are a developing nation that is trying to raise our heads now? Or is it because we don't have the adequate laws in the country to govern the rights of the child? What is the reason behind all this?
Thank you, Shamir. First of all, I have to tell you, in 1995, to protect children as well as women, a lot of legal reforms came up. 1995 Penal Code specifically amended, and new type of offences against the children as well as punishment. And then 2006, child trafficking. Likewise, we have the system. Immediately after that, they set up the National Child Protection Authority. Every police, you have a child and women care desk. every divisional secretary, you have a women care officer. Likewise, the institutional setup, and a lot of NGOs are also there. Now, where we have gone wrong, if the institutions are there, and also supporting community-based associations are there, no, we are not addressing the issue. I will tell the real issue. Now, this is the bitter truth. Thailand famous for what? Women prostitution. Male prostitution, number 1 Cambodia, number 2 Sri Lanka. Now, Sri Lanka has topped that. Therefore, the market has created. And also there are other reasons you have to see. Now, this modern slavery, why this incident happened? Because of economy. There are a lot of economic reasons why they sell their children, as well as they give their children for this type of domestic slavery. So we are not addressing that. That is one. And number 2, very recently, Horana area, 4 school children, they were producing a 444 film. And who are the actors? The same class. Now see, we have developed up to that level. So we have to see most of these things. That is where we are not properly monitoring our kids, as well as society also having a responsibility to that. That's why the guardian of a child is the district court. We are all there. And also a person is not coming from Australia or England and doing a child abuse. No. All these are close people. Do you know in Sri Lanka, the minimum age and maximum age happened for rape? 3 months from Kadawata. That kid was raped, a baby was raped. And the highest age is 91 years, Kahavat, for a revenge. So that's why this is where actually they come as a habit. How to change this one night? Victor Bahuman in 1996, he had lot of child abuse cases. Immediately he was deported to Switzerland. So what they have done? Every government is like that. Seya, Vidya, Saman Kumar, like that I can give lot of cases. If an incident coming, this is booming up. Now I'll give some statistics. 2012 to 2020, there are reported 5,890 child abuse cases. Johnston Fernando, the minister, said in the parliament in 2020, February 11th, the first 14 weeks in Sri Lanka, the first 14 weeks of the year, there were 142 rape cases, 42 child abuse cases, another type of cases 54. Now these cases, the opposition asked, the minister responded. So likewise, these are only reported. I think there are more than 25,000 cases unreported. Because if you report, what will happen? This can be done by an elderly person. No, I am telling they are not going to police. If father and mother arrested, how this kid survive? So therefore, the elders also responsible under the carpet, as you said, they keep it. So we have to take this out.
Professor, what is the resort a child who has been subjected to abuse, may it be sexual abuse or may it be abuse per se, what is the resort that this individual, this girl or boy has in terms of the laws in Sri Lanka? What can they do?
Actually, the child is helpless now. Even we have signed Child Right Convention, all these protection against cruelty, education, all this is there. To whom this kid is going to tell? That's why sometimes back they introduce a number, hotline, 1929, I can remember. But even that, at least a neighbor. That's why I saw one minister saying, if you all are looking, if you think your neighbors are having domestic servant, immediately call the police. Now only all these things are coming. At least my argument, there must be some watchdog, even in the society. If parents are neglecting, now there are a lot of cases, give me 1 minute, father and mother blind. These are the 3 kids. They are 14, 15, 16, selling certain things in the pavement. So who are looking these kids? We have all these institutions, we have all these NGOs, they are doing a great work. But there is unaddressed issues in this society because of poverty.
Yeah, Professor, before moving to Arita for his thoughts, Professor Mahanamheva, now Milani said that if you go to PETA on a normal day or a random day, you'll find children who are selling goods, who are involved in other various activities. What is the role of the NCPA, which is the arm or the authority in Sri Lanka to nab cases of that sort and make sure that individuals are brought to book? Now, if you go to Borella, for an example, I see a mother carrying her child who's around 5 or 6 years old, probably at the age of going to school, at the Borella junction. And this is right opposite the police in Borella. What are they doing? Absolutely nothing. Who is the authority? Who is the recognized body in Sri Lanka to take action in situations like this?
Absolutely, I agree with, as she said, there are more than 6,500 street children. I will give the statistics I have. All these children, they don't have anyone to look after. Yes, NCPA, according to my knowledge, they are the policy making body. But even the NCP chairman having the authority to sign even arrest warrant, which can be implemented any place in Sri Lanka. So they have the wide authority. Now you are asking this child labor. So child labor, Sri Lanka laws are still not as an offense. This is coming under Labor Ministry. So the Department of Labor, as well as anyone who is not sending their children less than 16 years, the Divisional Education Director can arrest them. So the institutions are there.
Right.
But actually these are not implementing. Even then they have to take to Ranmutugala near home and they have to keep it. So first you have to rehabilitate.
Right. Thank you very much, Professor Pratibha Mahanamheva. I'm now moving my attention to Aditya Wickramasinghe, Equality Director, I Pro Bono. Aditya, one of the reasons for individuals to go into houses and work as domestic, as pointed out by these learned speakers, is poverty. Then comes literacy. Then comes sex education at national level schools in the island. Now, I remember when we were in school, we were taught a little bit about sex education at grade 7, and now I hear that even that has been taken out of the syllabus and sex education is no more in the Sri Lankan syllabi, unfortunately. What is the reason behind all this? Is it that Sri Lanka has archaic laws in the island? Because now, as Professor Mahanamheva said, we've signed the convention in the year 1990, we implemented it as a law in 1991, we brought in the Penal Code Act and incorporated these things to the Act in 1995, but nothing substantial has been happening. Why?
First of all, I don't know which school you went to have sex education at grade 7, because I sure didn't have any sex education in school here at all. I don't know, Milani, did you ever have any sex education?
So which year were you out from college?
2002.
2002?
Yeah.
So, okay. Unfortunately, you've not gone to a good school, I believe.
And
no, but
actually, there was a page in our biology book on reproductive health,
grade
which
7.
our science teacher just skipped. You know, that lesson never happened.
Right, okay.
And that is the reality.
Right.
And thing is, it is not enough also to teach children sexual reproduction, because that's just a biological fact. And that's a scientific discussion. But what you need to teach children is comprehensive sexual and relationship education. That is what children need. You know, not just, it is not enough for them to know how to create children, but they need to know what is good touch, bad touch. They need to know how to have a healthy relationship. They need to know what an abusive relationship is. Not just an abusive relationship from a parent or an elder, but also when you're in an intimate relationship. They need to know what masturbation is. They need to know what puberty is. So all of this information is not given to children. And when should children be taught this? They should be taught when you're in grade 7 or preferably earlier. Now, when you're looking at statistics even coming from Sri Lanka on when children are first accessing pornography, that age is now 11 years old. Is the average age when a child is accessing pornography. Why? Because parents are very easily giving their children smartphones. and there is internet easily available, and with the internet you get pornography. So at that age, children are now consuming sexual content, but without the education of how to process that sexual content. Right? So our parents, our schools, our religious dignitaries who have to take a lot of responsibility and blame for not allowing appropriate sexual education for children, all of them are denying children and want to deny to educate their child about comprehensive sexual education. But they are all very happily giving their child smartphones with internet access to watch porn at the age of 11. And they are not equipping and giving the child the knowledge on how to handle that. And that is actually abuse.
Now,
that's another example of abuse.
Yeah, if I may interrupt you for a second here. Now we know there is an issue in the island, not only in the island, but all across the world.
Yeah.
That's learning online has become the new normal in Sri Lanka. So you're saying 11 years old, they're given access to technology, but actually now it starts probably when you're in grade 1 at the tender age of 6.
Yeah.
Because they have to use the internet, they have to use smartphones.
Age,
absolutely.
Right.
So what is the process that the government should adopt? What is the role of the governments in play regarding this?
There is already there have been several policy recommendations from within the Education Ministry on comprehensive sexual and reproductive education for children. There was a Hate Ape Pota a few years ago, which was starting at grade 7. To teach children very basic things about going through puberty, about feelings and emotions. So there's been a lot of research done. There's been a lot of good work done. These materials, the teaching books, the textbooks, they're all available. The problem is they're not being taught. And when they try to be taught, some religious dignitaries who should not be having sex in the first place make a big fuss about it, and then these books are withdrawn. So we're making policy decisions on educating our children based on the opinions of people who are supposed to be celibate. And we are therefore increasing the vulnerability of our children. Right? So there is material available. These materials have been approved by the administrators of our education ministry. Teach. That's the only thing they have to do. Teach.
But when you're in a country where even the teachers are involved in sexual abuse. Now, when I was coming to the show today, I got a news alert which said that a 49-year-old IT teacher at a school in Gampaha has sexually abused a 17-year-old girl, stating that she wanted some books from a bookshop in Colombo. As a result of that, this girl was abused. And this was spotted by a bystander and reported to the police. As a result of that, the teacher in question was arrested and action taken. So when the teachers itself, they are not playing their part, how can you impart knowledge on a child, Arita?
But if that child, that 17-year-old child, if she was taught what good touch, bad touch was, what sexual abuse was, if she was taught at 11, 12, 13, if she was taught those years, when that teacher was trying to abuse her, she would know that that was abuse, and she would have been equipped with the knowledge of what action to take in response to that abuse. Right now, we are not equipping our children with how to respond to even abuse. They don't even know that abuse is happening to them. And therefore, we're increasing their vulnerability, we're increasing the risks they face. And we're basically sending children out into a world with no possibility of protecting themselves. And we think shunning information from them is protection. That's wrong. It's wrong.
So what must respective governments do? Is it just bringing these sex education syllabus to the local syllabus? Would that solve the problem?
No, it's not going to solve the problem, but it'll at least empower our children. It'll actually help protect them. It won't solve them, but we're informing them, we'll be educating them, we'll be empowering them.
Thank you very much, Arthur Vikramasinghe, Equality Director, I Pro Bono. I open the floor for questions from our journalists. On to my immediate right is Attorney at Law Sonali Wanagabaduge. Left is Deshan Gonawala. And on to my far left today is Nadim Majid. Let's start off tonight's question and answer session with the lady herself, Attorney at Law Sonali Wanagabaduge.
Thank you, Shamir. Milani, my first question is for you. I'd like to start this conversation by talking about the abuse that goes on behind closed doors within the home. Oftentimes by trusted family members, where children have little or no understanding of the abuse or how to prevent it. So the child is unaware, the mother or the father is unaware of the paramount responsibility to protect. And society is either unaware or indifferent towards its role to protect. So in such a backdrop, how must we enable a multi-stakeholder action plan and engagement? What exactly needs to take place? Because we have the necessary laws, regulations in place. We have the state authorities in place, the frameworks. However, when it comes to the implementation, there are so many loopholes. So how must we comprehensively sort of maneuver our way through this as a society?
Honestly, it's very easy. It's not rocket science. Like Mr. Mahanamaheva said as well, the laws are in place, the systems are in place, and there is a 5-member group in the divisional secretariat office of every division dedicated to women and children. So there are child rights protection officers, early childhood development officers, counselors, women's rights officers, youth officers, and so on. And these are people that I work with on a daily basis. And their biggest complaint is that they are extremely under-resourced. So for them to have a report ready on behalf of a particular child, they have to go visit that house. And so we are not talking about going from Vellavatta to Bambalapitiya, right? Within the villages, even from the town to get to the house, it is at least 18 kilometers. So extremely under-resourced, no vehicles. I had a conversation with one officer one time who said to have access to one A4 sheet, we have to write on books and papers to get a bundle of A4 sheets. So this was after the question I asked her, why do you send me letters on 1/3 of a A4 sheet? So I think, so basically what I feel is that a lot of resources are spent at policy level for administration, for salaries and so on. But what comes down to the ground is very small.
No, but Milani, just adding to the question that Sonali posed before, when you speak about resources, however, now when this recent incident happened involving the 16-year-old domestic worker, everything seemed to be happening very fast. However, in normal cases, it's very, very slow.
Yes.
So all these incidents, aren't they politically motivated, unfortunately?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So this particular case is because of the politics involved. Or, you know, how it...
But this shouldn't be the case.
Obviously not. Yeah. So, I mean, we have many of these cases similar to these, right? But I have one case that has been going on for the past 10 years now. And the boy is now 15 years old. He's extremely frustrated. He wants to go to school. He doesn't want to cut school to go to court. And he, you know, he gives us excuses saying, look, I'm not studying because you're making me frustrated because I have to go to court. So there's a lot of psychological work that we have to work with. And it's unnecessary delay within the system as well. And I think you would also agree that if there's already a specific unit for children within the government system as well. So why not empower them? Why not, you know, give them more power, more resources to work on? Because a human rights case has a very short period of time.
Yeah.
Now, lawyers are also responsible for this. Wait, I'll tell. Now, I have seen in many courts, the magistrate or the judge want to finish this early. Then the lawyer say, going through, next 6 months I don't have a date. So, believe me, there are cases like that also. So then, at least to finish a case, not only the judiciary, the lawyers also must support.
No, but does that happen in Sri Lankan
Yeah,
courts,
it's happening. I have seen. I will give
Yeah.
witness. It's happening.
So for example,
The lawyer saying, yeah,
Yeah.
next 6 months I don't have a date.
Yeah.
So who is suffering finally?
We don't have to go too far, right? For example, like I was saying, a human rights case, there's a particular time it has to be heard and finished, right? For example, in Singapore, very close by to us and similar laws, a child rights case is heard and final order given within 3 to 6 months. So investigations, everything complete, 3 to 6 months. But I currently have cases that we've been handling for over 10 years. So
the child is already an adult.
Child is already an adult, and child gets frustrated.
The average rape case takes about 13 years in Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
Dr. Manu, you mentioned earlier about the number of child abuse cases that come to the NCPA, and I was just reading a UNICEF report as well, which states that the NCPA in 2015 received about 12,500 complaints of child abuse. How many of these result in convictions? Is there any statistic or is there a data set out there that shows us what the conviction rate is for cases of child sexual abuse?
That's a very good question. Even very few. Now I know there are more than 20,000 cases of pending. And also, if you see the last 20 years, we don't have a database at least. Because the issue, if it is a child abuse case, the father, mother or the relation, they don't want to go ahead with this. Once again, they look the child future. Specifically, I will tell, most of these cases, the children in between 16 and 18, specifically ladies, girls, even it can be without her consent. But what will happen, I can give cases in Anuradhapura and some other cases, even the state council agreed, they went for a marriage. So these are very sensitive cases, I am telling, very sensitive cases. And also there are other cases where the defendant is very powerful and therefore they have withdrawn these cases. So even I can't see 0.001% convicted even from appealing to Supreme Court. That is the issue in Sri Lanka. So I asked National Child Protection Authority, I also involved with some of their teamwork to get the children video, audio evidence. So now they have make up these policies. But specifically we need a child court and at least 6 months if you can finish this investigation and start a case with, like a jury case, I think we can, you know, finish and give some example for the society.
Nadim, if you look at the grave crimes abstract of the police for the last 3 years, there's been 0 convictions for child rape cases.
0. Professor Atulya.
Yeah, I'm a bit cautious about, talking about specific issues and, the consequences. My view is that let's not look at a complex issue by trying to find simple solutions. I personally don't believe that the sex education is the sole or the most important issue in this, as very correctly Mr. Mahanama mentioned. Poverty is one of the things, but in my opinion, there are so many imbalances within our societies. One is the imbalance between the gender, men and women, the power, authority. Age, there is an imbalance between, by the position, because of the age, they have some authority. Then the social status, educational differences, power and authority, and also, as Pratibha very correctly said, economic power. All these contribute to this complex issue. And that's how it happens. So if we only talk about consequences, when this lady mentioned about one of the consequences of people coming forward, stigma. Stigma is one of the big issue why people don't come, and the psychological trauma they go through. So there are a lot of negatives why people don't want to come up. So rather than focusing on what should happen after all this happen, we need to address the root causes. Obviously, one is what Pratibha mentioned about the economic imbalances and the consequences because of that. But I think if we look at a long-term big picture, educating children, educating women, changing our education system reforms, including soft skills and improving the emotional intelligence. That's the very most important thing to me.
No, but that's what Arita also tried
No,
to
she
highlight.
mentioned about it, because if you can get into other person's shoe and think, if you can consider every child is your child, I'm not talking about sexual abuse. And if you feel, if a child is being abused, either physically, emotionally, sexually, or whatever it is, that it is like your own child, and prepared to voice for it, stand for it, and make a
No,
social...
but all this, Professor Atula, is easy to say.
No.
Changing the mindset of the people is the most difficult task.
That is because of the, as Pratibha said, there are a lot of laws.
Now, I'll
But
tell you
there
a
are
best example. Now,
implementation
where does abuse,
bottlenecks. They don't
where does
happen.
abuse take place?
They don't happen
No.
now with
It's
this.
at the Vatican.
No, with the
Even
current...
Pope Francis has said, now all these people are learned individuals, they are priests. And look at how child abuse takes place, Professor. So this argument cannot be bought over saying we are going to change the mentality.
It happens now when it comes to the recent thing. There's policemen involved, teachers. It's not only teachers, doctors, irrespective of the social status. So that has to be dealt with in a different way. But that's what I said.
No, but at the end
Zero
of the-
tolerance.
but at
That's the most
but at
important
the
thing.
end of the
Professor, is that because of the pressure, no? Now, doctors are highly, because they have no other way, because the, this divorce rate is very high in Sri Lanka. And also they can't get the service from anywhere. The spa and all closed. Do you think there's something in...
That's not an excuse for abusing, not even a child, even a woman. I don't agree with that.
No,
there are a lot of psychological consequences as a result of COVID, true. There are mental illnesses, but you can't say that somebody is, abusing another person. There are psychological reasons, of course.
Professor Atula, do you feel that there is a, you mentioned about power and authority, but do you also feel that there's a race and ethnicity dynamic? A race and ethnicity dynamic when it comes to, especially when it comes to, like, for example, we take this most recent case of a plantation workers, a girl from a plantation worker family. You get in our country, if you go to a affluent household, not just in Colombo, but in any of the sort of urban centers or even in the villages, your walawas and mansions and all, you'll always find your servants, usually from the plantations, usually of questionable age or varying age range. And we're in a situation where even now you see advertisements for apartment complexes that are coming up. And in the plan you see like the servants' quarters, small either 6x6 or 5x5 room, sometimes smaller than a prison cell as well. Do you feel that in our society that we view certain sections of our society as almost subhuman, and that this may be contributing to this sort of culture of violence against the disempowered and disenfranchised?
So I don't like to go down the line of race and ethnicity. I think there is association between, estate workers and poverty. But I think poverty is the main issue why children end up in, whether as servants in houses or doing other jobs, domestic things. I'll be very cautious to say that there's an intimate link between the race and the ethnicity with all this, what happens. It cut across every social strata, every religion, every ethnicity.
So, Aditya, are you in agreement with Professor Atula when he says that sex education is not the most important or imperative component in all this? There's other social issues as well, like poverty and uplifting the emotional intelligence of individuals.
I don't think the professor
agree
was
on
trying to say that sex education was not relevant. I think what he was trying to say is that it's not the most and the only factor here.
Absolutely.
And that's true. I agree with that because there's multiple factors here at play. And the professor rightly pointed out the importance of emotional intelligence. So when I first moved to Sri Lanka a few years ago, Milani knows very well, I think Nadeem also knows, I helped start this project called Think Equal, which was to teach children social and emotional intelligence. We brought together Montessori and the National Institute of Education here. We created this really incredible curriculum.
Absolutely. I can vouch for it because two of my children, who are now 7 and 5, when they were in Montessori, they were pilot students. And I have read every single letter and every single word of the Think Equal books, the Think Equal curriculum. And you'd see the difference in children identifying their emotions. I'd let Arita go on with that because he knows best, but that program was just...
It was an incredible program. You're working with government to implement it in schools. It was getting a lot of support. And unfortunately, some politicians did not like what the program was trying to do, which was to empower and educate children, and therefore started saying that the program was trying to promote homosexuality to young children, and therefore the program must stop, even though, as Milani knows, there was nothing to do with homosexuality.
There's nothing to do with homosexuality.
Yeah.
So, Arita, what was the ultimate fate of the Think Equal program?
The program died.
It died. It just died. Thankfully for me, my kids went through it. Thankfully. I'm so grateful for that, but that's it. It just died.
So what does this program entail? Just enlighten us.
So it teaches children values such as empathy, compassion, critical thinking, responsible action, conflict resolution.
So all this is directed towards uplifting the emotional intelligence of a child. So where does the sex education come into play in all this?
Well, that comes at a later stage of a child, right?
This is early childhood.
This is early childhood.
I think 4+.
Yeah.
3+.
Until about 7, 8. You first build the emotional maturity of the child. And then you start equipping the child with the other information the child needs in order to live in this world. But building that foundation block for a child, that emotional maturity, is very critical, because otherwise it's not enough to... today, having access to information is very easy for a child of anyone. It's the ability to comprehend and process that information that is critical. And that is what Think Equal was doing. Unfortunately, certain political leaders found a threat in it, probably because it is not in political interest to have empowered and educated citizens.
Was it during the previous regime? Or
it was during the previous regime, yes.
Well, okay.
Aritha, speaking about Sri Lanka's education system and comprehensive sexuality education, which you briefly touched on, what about these concepts of toxic masculinity, over-sexualization and hypersexualization of the girl child, of young women, sort of creating an attitudinal shift in the minds of people? How must we go about it? Because it is quite terrifying to be a woman, especially to be a woman and to walk down a street in Sri Lanka.
No, toxic masculinity as a man, I'll say, is a big problem. Not just in Sri Lanka, but across the world. And when we're looking to see some of the child abuse work we're doing, it's shocking to see that actually a lot of the perpetrators of sexual violence against school girls are school boys.
Right.
There are, at least when I was in school, we used to have these superhero cards and sports heroes cards, with different characteristics, and you could trade your cards with your friends depending on which superhero or sports hero you had. Now schoolboys have formed rings where they are trading nude pics of girls based on the school the girl comes from, the grade the girl is in, and all those characteristics. Those are the cards that are being traded by schoolboys themselves. And this is toxic masculinity at its, it's not even at its peak, because these are kids in school. So we are not, again, it's a failure of the education system, because children at the end of the day spend most of their time in school and through the school institution. If there's one institution that can help change the way a child thinks and behaves, it's the school. But if this is happening within the school itself, then it's a education system's failure.
And it continues in the universities in the form of ragging.
Yeah.
When they get the opportunity,
Correct, yeah.
This is exactly the same thing which happens in a different form.
Yeah, Milani, I'd like your
Our
thoughts.
state has, just on that, our state has been sitting on a child protection policy for a very long time.
Yeah, it was
Sitting
just
on it.
ratified in
Right.
2019.
So why have we been sitting on a child protection policy for such a long time? Then, if we have a child protection policy for Sri Lanka, this policy should be adopted by all our schools. private schools, government schools, everything. Every school should have a child protection policy, so children are empowered. They know.
We see the manner in which government departments and institutions act in silos when it comes to child protection also, since that's our topic of discussion today. There is no, the intersectionality between the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Education is lost. I mean, this is common sense.
So there was a superb system brought in, but it was only a regulation, it did not become law. I don't know, Mr. Mahane, whether you've heard of it, the Blue Book, which had the clinical case conferencing and the institutional case conferencing. So the clinical case conferencing is when a child is, say, a victim of abuse or whatever, and taken to the hospital. The psychiatrist, the pediatrician, the head nurse, whoever is involved within the clinical side of it will sit together and discuss the plan for this child.
Amazing.
And it is mandatory that they sit together and write a report and get it out. Right after the clinical case conferencing follows the institutional case conferencing. So the police officer, the probation officer, the child rights protection officer, one of those members from the clinical case conferencing, all of them sit together and discuss the care plan of this child, whether she's going to be removed from the family home or whether she's going to be given to a fit person, a grandparent, or whether she's going to be institutionalized. All this entire plan is discussed. But as far as I know, there is only 1 or 2 areas in Sri Lanka that actually sit down and do these case conferencing.
They started this, but there was a high protest from the family members, basically father and mother. And they complained to the Ministry of Education and it didn't work. But this also, they didn't start with the proper way of awareness.
Exactly.
As you perfectly explained, this type of things were done by certain organizations. But what happened, the kid also most of the time attached to father and mother. So what happened, the kid was crying and there were no trained counselors at least. So we propose there has to be at least a counselor.
Absolutely.
Then only you can change the mind of
And even in the institutional case conferencing, there is no lawyer.
no law.
Everybody is there, but a lawyer is not there. So the one
But
person
police
who
also
protects
matron, no, they put.
police, yes, and
Matron.
matron also. So these are things that can be improved. A few brains would sit together and improve these systems and actually include it in part of the law. So not exactly in sections of the law, but a schedule to the law, kind of like practices for the judiciary to follow in a particular case.
Professor Mahanameva, just to interrupt, a lot of the talk that does come out of what we're hearing is that the primary issue here is in terms of execution, and you also recognize this. In your work with government officers at the moment, has there been steps to proactively address these issues, especially in terms of execution when it comes to addressing the issues? Because one of the biggest accusations, particularly to the NCPA, is that they are very reactive. They wait for public sentiment to build up before they want to push forward a case and things of that nature. So has there been any discussion on actually being proactive in terms of executing the policies or executing the ideas?
Yeah. I work with Plan International and Save the Child. We had several workshops for children. The biggest girls' school in Asia, we had a awareness. Thereafter, we put a box. After our lectures, one police, me, and another one, lot of things we identify. Whatever the children say is purely true. I can't openly say. This has happened from closest family members. And I said to the principal, don't discuss this with the children and see the real situation. So proactive is very, very less or weaker from the public sector side. So what we have to do specifically, we have to get involvement with community-based organizations like this, and we should work together. Otherwise, this work plan's not working. Now NCPA, they started a work reforming all the laws, but they called all the NGOs also. Attorney General Department, experts, NGOs, community-based, and now they have set up a policy. I think they have submitted that to Minister of Justice, and it may work. But political will also, the other side very important. Otherwise, this may not. Now see, Honorable Sudarshini Fernand openly said they are against, and the Women Parliament group. So that is a proactive. So likewise, they must come forward. Even I saw the minister in charge of this ministry also making a statement. But it will stop somewhere else. That's why my worry.
Yeah, I just want to raise a question also. Mr. Vikramasinghe, you've particularly speaking about being proactive. I think one of the big questions, and given your work overseas as well, in terms of the benchmark for deterrence to those who commit crimes against children, women, and abusive in nature, do you think the deterrence in place in Sri Lanka in terms of the legal framework and also the enforcing authorities is on par with what you would call a global benchmark?
Deterrence has multiple factors, what we mean by deterrence. One is, of course, the severity of punishment. But I think the most important deterrence is the chance of getting caught and then the chance of actually being convicted. Now, in Sri Lanka, when there are actually about 12 offences in our penal code which deal with children, all of them have major sentences for crimes against children. So in terms of if you're looking at a benchmark, an international benchmark as a punishment, that deterrence we do satisfy. But when we look at the other factors of deterrence, the chances of getting caught and the chance of being convicted, we perform extremely poorly. As the professors rightly put it here, the conviction rate is probably 0.001%. When we're looking at 0 convictions for child abuse and rape for the last few years, I mean, that's a 0% conviction rate, right? When we're looking at the volume of actual child abuse happening and the pittance that's reported, again, that shows that there is no deterrence because victims of abuse are not reporting, they're not able to report it, and there's no point in even reporting it because they're going to be languishing in court for about 12 years. So the child is actually being further victimized and punished through this system.
But
whereas
some cases they take in the judge's chamber also to protect the privacy of the kid. But that also very rare now.
That if you make a request.
Oh,
so
if you
if
make
there
a
is a lawyer appearing for the
That's
victim,
Yeah.
if you make a request, then it is called in chamber.
But still, if that case is going to go on for 12 to 13 years, you're forcing that child to relive these moments beyond that child's childhood.
So, Minali, I just want to touch a little bit about this protecting the identity of the victim, because we know Sri Lanka being a small nation, even the girl who was abused and who burned to death as a result of the incident that took place a few days ago, we know her name. There is a picture out there. However, take a look at the 2012 gang rape in India. We don't know the name. We don't have a picture. There is so much of identity protection in countries like India, but we are far lagging behind.
So I was going through, I saw something on social media one day when a young boy has been kept as a domestic worker and he has been abused by the lady and whoever was there as well. And he was giving out a statement out to the media as soon as the incident happened, right after, and you can see the SOCO unit is still at the place. So one thing is, like I said, when the child has to reintegrate into normalcy, a sense of normalcy back into society, that is a major issue. But at the onset of an ongoing case, when all this is put out, the child's statement is put out there in the media. Even in one of our cases, it's just out there in the media. So this is going to be, it's a joyride for the defense.
It's a criminal offense as
It's
well
a criminal
to do that
offense.
under
But
section 365C.
it cannot go public. It's a statement given to police department or NCPA.
It goes out in the media. So when it goes out in the media, it goes out in the public. And you can see the police officers also around there. There's an ongoing investigation. Police hasn't completed their investigation. There's an ongoing criminal case. So this is what I'm talking about, protecting the identity of the victim.
But
and
that is
honestly,
not
even
happening.
the accused has a right to have his identity protected because there's an ongoing case.
But we
that's not-
have 2018 victims and witnesses assistance, protection, authority and the act. So there is a responsibility for this institution, even a motion by them, to protect these type of...
And that department is absolutely efficient. I mean, the moment you send a complaint, they're very good, the Victim and Witness Protection Authority.
Yeah, but now even Professor Mahanamya in his opening remarks mentioned the name of 2 girls who were raped and killed, right? The identity is not protected of the victim itself. So there is something not right in the system, isn't it, Milani?
So I think things like media ethics regulated. Because I don't think there is a regulated authority for ethics and so on. And
no, there is a regulatory authority for print media journalism in Sri Lanka.
Print media
Press
also,
Council is there. Yeah.
Yes, and also in the Children and Young Persons Ordinance, which is an archaic, it's an old act. And now there are reforms being made and they're hoping to put out a new act based on the CYPO.
Age
yes, and I really hope it sees the light of day. In that also it says that you can't divulge any information of the victim or the child who comes.
Because we don't have right to privacy in our constitution. We don't have a privacy legislation. Even we don't have a data protection law. So because all these things, Shamir, what will happen? And the social media is proactive than any other one. So immediately they put it. So therefore, how can we stop this? Even in the printed media, the names I said long time before. And even that culture, basically, we have to change the thinking pattern. And also, here Sri Lanka culture, even everyone blaming the female, not the other one. So even, you know, in the brothel house ordinance or anything, where is the male arrested? No. So this society is basically going, this is where the harassment again begins.
Yeah, Professor.
I mean, when it comes to media, I mean, not only with child sex things, we have discussed even COID reporting, identifying people, so right to privacy, social media, all this has an impact. I think strategically, if we try to only concentrate on sexual abuse, due to various reasons like stigma and many other things, we may not win. But if you take abuse as a whole, child abuse, in whatever the form, as a reason for zero tolerance at least, I mean, leaving out women, vulnerable women abuse, I think that's a way to work forward. As Pratibha very correctly said, all these, you know, NGOs working is good. However, unless we engage and involve people, and they have a voice. I mean, some of these solutions are proposed by intellectuals, experts and all that. Sometimes, you know, the victims, their families are not consulted, so those things cannot be implemented. So it has to be a top-down, bottom-up thing. And again, when it comes to NGO, I do respect for all the NGOs who has a responsible thing, but we have to be mindful there are NGOs who thrive on foreign dollars and all that, and try to destabilize countries, and we can't, I mean, this responsibility cannot be rest on their hands, used for a political end. It has to be a genuine commitment by social movements and people getting together, and the way forward is you have to, we shouldn't just, you know, discuss this and forget about it. It has to be an ongoing, continuous discussion, dialogue, debate, impacting upon the education, child's rights, education. So it's a message.
So even this debate started because of a very powerful minister was involved.
Absolutely.
Other than that, this is also under the...
And if they were in power, this wouldn't have come up. I mean, that's a fact.
Absolutely. I mean, but there were cases, a lot of cases were there.
This is exactly, it's a power issue.
More than 11 cases.
It's a power issue. Even this came out because of a power issue. Otherwise, it wouldn't have come out. That's a fact.
Talking about corporal punishment at schools, Arita, you know, we discussed about these topics in the recent past. I recollect when Sonali was hosting Face the Nation a few months ago, we spoke about all this and more. The main issue is, do you think that corporal punishment in a country like Sri Lanka should be there? Because if you look at the social media very avidly, you would realize that some say, who have studied at government schools, corporal punishment is the way to discipline a student. Is that an option?
No, corporal punishment is never the answer.
Think equal is the answer.
Absolutely.
Teaching them emotional intelligence is the answer.
That's a unanimous agreement.
Because if you're teaching children that violence is a solution to a mistake, then you are creating a violent society. And that is why we are having this violence. Violence perpetuates itself. And we've been stuck in this cycle of violence for generations because it is starting, that violence is starting at school.
Can I add one thing?
Absolutely.
Can I add one thing?
Yeah.
This came from Polonnaru area. This is a monk, principal of the school, not studying English language. Got a stick and hammered until bleeding. This child is not studying, therefore this is the only solution. No, you have to train the teachers. When I was studying, I was beaten several times, but I am not promoting that because actually, as perfectly they said, yes, there must be a system change.
So, so I just want to now, parents, like in particular mothers, they think I have had the child for 9 months in my stomach. As a result of that, I have the right to hit my own child. But that's not the case, right, Professor Milan?
No, that's lack of parenting skills. I think there is a misnomer. People think that this corporal punishment was a cultural thing. It's wrong. It's not a Sri Lankan cultural thing. It came after the imperialists landed in this country and, trained people to do their bloody job as they are told. Now, as he very correctly said, the psychological phenomena behind it is once you punish a child, some people identify with the aggressor. And they also, generally, we think if I am abused, I may be a better father, I wouldn't abuse other people. No, certain section identify with the aggressor and they do the same thing, which is the paradox. That is why ragging happens, and that's why corporal punishment is not the way forward to discipline children. The other unfortunate thing that teachers may get angry with me for this comment, but there are certain teachers who bring, certain issues, psychological issues from home. They can't ventilate that. They actually take the revenge from the child.
This is why every child
be
actor needs to have a psychological assessment.
Absolutely, it's not a direct.
Everyone who is within the child sector, right? In New Zealand, for you to open a daycare center, you are reviewed for over a year until you are allowed to open. So they check your psychological status, financial status, everything. So these are things that we've been talking about.
And it's not deliberate.
Officers,
it's not deliberate.
Exactly.
They are not deliberately doing it.
Simple criminal record check. There is no sex offenders register in Sri Lanka. You're allowing, pedophiles and child sex abusers to actually be in close proximity to children without any ability to check whether whether they are actually perpetrators or convicted perpetrators.
Yeah.
Can I add? There was another problem, I think.
1 minute. Can I add? Because he asked a good question. There are 3 guardians for a kid. Number 1, biological parents. They don't own the kid. And there are temporary guardian also, school masters, teachers. And the legal guardian is the courts. So therefore, the best benefit could be done by the court. So even father and mother cannot beat a child. So that is the basic thing.
But a question relating to what you said is that even though corporal punishment is frowned upon and many people in the teaching practice do condemn it, what you also see is that many people in the teaching practice, many people even at home, very rarely actually empower the child with the knowledge that what corporal punishment is wrong, getting a beating is wrong, and use it as a deterrent themselves also. So how is it that the child, at a young age, has the ability to stand up for himself?
This was really changed with President Chandrika Bandaranaike Kumaratunga was the president, Honorable Tara Dimmel. Actually, to stop, they need the cane. So the cane is 2 inches or something like that. So they try to stop it. But there are certain ways because we go for the shortest one. Shortest answer is corporal punishment. No, we have to stop that. Otherwise, more prison to be open. And also this ragging issue because
that's one of the worst issues.
Yeah, that's a cruelty, violation of fundamental right. But in the ragging, we have seen last 25 years as a lecturer in a university, we have tried to stop that. But that also a social imbalance issue. So why they come and rag? Because all must come and association. No, there are certain type of revenge. That is where you have to start with the counseling and induction programs properly.
So the need for mental health, answering your question, where parents are, hitting their children within the house. It's a mother who is extremely frustrated or a father who is extremely frustrated. We don't talk about these issues within the family. It can be a sexual issue between the father and the mother, domestic violence, stress, and it comes out, the children get the better of it. So the need for mental health awareness is of extreme need, I believe, in our country.
Deshan, you spoke on how children should be aware that corporal punishment, for example, is wrong. When President Chandrika's time, when the National Child Protection Authority was set up, there was a hotline 444 at that time. There was a 94, 95. I was only 10 years old. And when I was watching kids' cartoons after school, there were advertisements on TV would flash at that time, teaching me about my rights, what the NCPA is for, this is the number to dial if I am abused. So it was excellently targeted marketing. It actually made me a champion of child rights when I was, after watching those ads during my cartoon watching time. Then me and my friends in school, we decided to form a child rights society in our school, and we went to some other schools to educate other children on what their rights were. That form of simple messaging from the government, from the NCPA, had a profound impact on at least my life and my friends. So that, now we're at an age where actually, there is much more resources than in 1994. More people have televisions, more people have smartphones. This kind of messaging can directly go to individuals and children.
But there's another issue. 1 minute. Sure. There's another issue. Now with this economic situation, father, mother, children, they don't have any time to have a meal even, because all are heavy duty work. So therefore that culture also there. But I don't like you are giving smartphones for the kids. When you give the smartphone for a kid, they actually get into certain other things also. And they are addicted. Even those days how my mother fed me, but today we have seen in the society, this has been all changed.
But Professor, there is no option now.
That's why we have to think about option.
No, but what is the option? There is no option because of the new normal.
The option is if the child is online schooling for 2 hours,
right,
no more screen time for the rest of the day. Go outside, play in the balcony, get some sand, play, climb a tree.
So they can even access pornographic material during the
absolutely. I have witnessed a child sharing the screen of how to get on YouTube videos.
You give this phone for a 5-year-old kid, they will teach us, because they are very advanced in technology. That's why all these things were changing. As perfectly said, you are asking for a solution. Father, mother, family must get together and teach their social attitudes as well as how to behave in the society. Otherwise, those days we have Sunday school. I went to Sunday school, but now a kid has no time. All they go for tuition. Very high competition.
We tell our clients, let's start with 10 minutes. 10 minutes of your conscious time with your child. That means your phone kept away, everything else kept away, just 10 minutes with your child. You see the difference. And we have had parents who have come and told us within a week or two, my God, the difference, even though it's just 10 minutes.
No, I just want to add to what he said about child's right. I'm totally for that. However, that has to be handled very carefully without creating antagonism between the parents and children, because that can go to that extent. So thereby actually making parents also a partners of it, and teaching and training parental skills. Unfortunately, it's a skill. Parenting style is a skill. Now, as she said, how to handle, difficult situations. We are living in a different world. I have to be very open about it. Professor, all these were brought up after 1977, open economy, the attitudes change, the relationships change, value for money change, and this is what we are seeing. So while respecting the rights of the children should also understand to respect the rights of the parents and the partnership, the family values, and how to work together. That's where the emotional intelligence come, and all this has to come together. If we try to address these issues as fragmented, patchy way, there's not going to be a solution. Sorry, you were going to ask a question.
So you mentioned parenting skills and there being an absence or at least a shortcoming in parenting skills. And this is something that is raised in, that has been raised by UNICEF as well, in the case of Sri Lanka, that parenting skills are, that as a society we're found very wanting when it comes to having a good standard of parenting skills. How is it that Sri Lanka, being, you know, of the status that we're in, with sort of a higher middle, sort of not upper, but lower middle income country, that parenting skills, how is it that we ended up in a situation where parenting skills has become a problem, a big problem when it comes to addressing child rights? Is this something that has arisen recently, or is it that we have been found that we have been wanting for parenting skills for, you know, centuries?
No, we had parenting skills for centuries which were passed from grandmother to mothers, but the women's role has changed. The mother is still the mother. Those days, I mean, they used to go and, you know, fetch water from somewhere, then the cooking was different, but they are very, you know, different, you know, professionals now. It's very busy type of thing within the families. So, and we are not living in extended families, so the traditional parenting skills are not, you know, handed over along the lines. But at the same time, we should remember, even in education system, they have a thing called home science those days. You know, a girl is taught how to stitch, how to cook. Now, after the education system change, you know, targeting for this rat race, introducing, for me, grade 5, scholarship is a form of abuse. Children don't have time, as she said, because the screen time. Colombo district, I can't give you the exact statistics, a certain significant percentage of children under the age of 12 doesn't spend an hour outside their home, no playing, and as a result they become obese. So all this negative impact of media, use of social media, all this has complicated and eroded traditional values, while learning from the Western countries good things, technology. We should actually have our roots still strongly rooted in our traditional ways. There are a lot of good things in traditional Sri Lankan.
Professor Atul, I must disagree with some of your statements on traditional values. First of all, home science, home economics is, I probably think, the most useless subject.
I loved it though. I loved it.
You are talking as a man. I'm talking.
No, because in our school only, you know, girls were sent to do home economics because girls' role was seen to be prepared to become housewives.
No.
Okay, and stitching and doing cooking. I don't think that should be what women's role should be. And I think we should also stop blaming and demonizing the open economy as if child abuse started because suddenly there was that we were trading more with the world. You know, the open economy should be credited for uplifting millions of Sri Lankans out of poverty. And as we've been discussing, poverty is a main cause for access to justice, at least when you're abused. So we need to stop demonizing.
Okay, can I correct what I said? The political change
abuse has been happening against children
as a result
for
of
a long
open
time.
economy. Let me say that.
Now we're just reporting it. Abuse of children has been happening for a long time. And I don't think the proportion of abuse has increased. What has increased is awareness and reporting of it. And actually, until 1995, the age of sexual consent for a child was 12. So it wasn't even considered pedophilia or sexual abuse if you were sleeping with a 12-year-old child. It wasn't even illegal to do. It was very normal. And to this day, the Muslim Marriage and Divorce Act still allows for a 12-year-old child for someone to marry and have sex with a 12-year-old girl child. Right? So our law is still explicitly allowing pedophilia.
Alternative was introduced very recently.
Just very
not
recently,
introduced.
yeah.
There has been a
Because
cabinet decision to introduce it, but there's been no reform.
General marriage ordinance, if they wish, but no one may come. But actually, the other one is I like to add the online teaching also, because I am 24 hours involved sometimes. This is the other harassment we are giving, Professor, for the children. That is where mental stigma sometimes. So we have to think that also online teaching, university, school children and all, because they don't have a time to do that. Because immediately after the online teaching, they go for another session. Then you have to do the assignment, download all these things. Even 10 minutes, whatever you say, it's very impossible to get that. So we have to change that culture also.
Milani, just so that we can be hopeful also in this discourse, we need to also talk about the socio-economic factors, the financial dependence implications when it comes to abuse. Whilst prevention and redressal of violence against children and women has to be a top priority for governments, when we really look at the rupees and cents, the funding, the budgetary allocation, for example, the defense budget was 300 billion rupees, whereas the NCPA was given 40 million rupees. With 34 police officers at the police unit for the entire country. So we're talking about a gross disproportionality when it comes to something as pivotal and precious as preventing child abuse. There are simple measures that can be taken. For example, and I took these of a speech of the UN chief recently, creating safe ways for women and children to seek support without alerting their abusers, declaring shelters as an essential service, setting up emergency warning systems in pharmacies, groceries, increasing investment in helplines, services, civil society organizations, making sure abusers are prosecuted expeditiously. I mean, this is common sense.
Absolutely.
Right? It's not rocket science, as you said.
Let's not talk only about child abuse. Talk about the floods. What would happen if the civil society organizations didn't help the people? We'll talk about the quarantine centers. Have you seen the amount of civil society organizations helping these people who didn't have an underwear, who didn't have a sanitary napkin to use?
Absolutely, which also shows us the power of what can be done when there is multi-stakeholder, multi-sectoral engagement.
Exactly. I mean, they play a massive role. And I think the allocation of the national budget towards the NCPA is low and defense is very high, because the women and children sector is probably a sector that gets a lot of foreign funding as well, right? But again, this gets stuck at the policy level. It hardly ever comes down to the grassroots level. Even when we are conducting, say, organizations like Plan, Save the Children, they get people, outsource resource persons to come in and do programs for, say, probation officers. And these are all about their psychological evaluations, their assessments, how they need to have their cup full before they start working on a case and so on. But the officers are extremely frustrated because it's difficult to even pay the resource people to come in and do a full day workshop because the budget is not allocated. And a lot of people won't come in for free, you know, to share their knowledge. So, I mean, like I always say, it's not rocket science, it's very easy. But like Professor said, I think we need a political will to do it. It's very sad when you see one particular case that is politically motivated getting highlighted, and we can talk till dawn. Now, I can't stop talking. I'll talk till dawn if you let me. But it is very sad to see that one particular case is being highlighted and we are talking about it, but to get that political will pushed to get things done, just do it.
And let me take you back to just a year ago. Do you think the decision by the incumbent government in particular to remove cabinet status, particularly for this issue of women and children, for the subject of women and children, do you think that special status that was given to the issues faced by women and children at cabinet level being taken away has hindered the cause of actually helping these people
Absolutely.
out?
I always keep saying that the people who are educated on women and children or child rights are not given their particular place. For example, Dr. Sudarshini Fernandopulle, she's worked in the Parliamentary Caucus for Children. She knows what it is, and she has been very proactive when she was in the caucus. People like, I mean, I don't support any political party, but if you have the knowledge, that is where you need to be placed so that you know what you're talking about, you know what you're doing, you know how your ministry should run.
I mean, our state minister for women is a man, you know.
And are they educated in child rights?
But
Do they know what the...
they have a committee, no? Expert committees there.
Yeah, but
Even the minister is not educated, but you can have your experts, you have consultants, and the women protection committees are there. So why can't he get the advice from those committees and implement?
Ideally, if they come into that position, within a month or two, they need to get educated, by heart the convention, know your laws, talk about, you know, so that you can...
Professor Mahaname, but I think fundamentally, I think it's easy for all of us to agree that even if you have a group of professionals and experts, it's much easier to handle women's affairs when you're a woman, isn't it?
Yes, but I mean, it is not always now. If you see...
Dr. Manu, I'm not sure if you recall, but I think it was in 2013, we had a women's affairs, was he minister or deputy?
Mr. Karali, was it?
Mr. Karali at the, who basically said, was advocating for victims of rape reconciling with their rapists.
I don't agree with that, but at that time NCPA chairman was a woman.
But no, but what I'm saying is it's important that the people who are appointed to these positions, they need their public representatives.
But they are
that's a whole conversation about problems in the governance system.
That's what he was talking about.
But the thing is, it's important that as a government, with the heads of the government, the president and the prime minister, need to show a commitment to resolving these social issues when they are deciding who they're going to assign the portfolio to. Don't you think so?
Yeah.
Not only
I have no objection what you say, but all these people are appointed by expert committee. So the committee is all intelligent experts, professors and doctors. So therefore, their recommendation only the government executed. I don't know.
Milani, if I am a child who is undergoing abuse, what is the and I want to seek help, what is the first thing I should do? If you can outline that process simply for our viewers' benefit as well.
Tell one of your 5 people. So what we teach children is 5 fingers, unless your hand, I mean, you don't have a hand, so you have one allocated person per finger.
Okay.
So it can be your mother, auntie, teacher, father, whatever, you know, whoever who trusts. So we also teach them then trust. We teach them what trust is, somebody who will listen to you, who will respect what you have to say. Right. And if you feel that sometimes your body will give you warning signs, you may not know that something is wrong, but your tummy might hurt, you might start sweating, your heart might be pounding. So certain things that your body will give you warning signs before you think it's wrong. So that is when you need to take a step back and realize, okay, this is wrong. I need to tell one of my 5 people or all 5 of them.
What if that person doesn't have these 5 people or the close associates?
Which is why we want to educate children to try to have that 5 people. There can be someone, at least a teacher in school, or, you know, a next door neighbor, somebody you're close to who you can trust. And, you know.
When a
trust
parent...
is a big word.
It is. So with children, I mean, with the younger ones, what we teach them is somebody who will listen to you when you're talking, somebody who you can actually go and talk to.
Milani, when a parent takes the child to the police station, are our police officers sensitized enough to deal with child abuse cases?
Honestly, some of them are, some of them aren't. So we have had police officers who have, when the child doesn't talk, they have gone, changed the uniform, come back in civil, given some toys and got the child to talk. But also there are officers who honestly don't care. So it always helps to always, I mean, try to take a lawyer with you. Try to at least go to the Legal Aid Commission and take a lawyer with you to the police station, because then there is more time and yes.
May I add certain things for this? Now, women and child care desk, certain police station not within that complex. They have set up in. If you go to Kandy, it is separately, as perfectly you said, because they don't show they are policemen or women, and matron is there. And also there is a director, women and child care days. So they have separately trained. And if you go to NCPA, that is totally, it go like a civil. So now what the current situation, even in police department, they treat that in a separate way. So I visited 1 or 2 places, and they take the video conferencing, as well as NCPA police station also. They are going to set up 9 places. That is good. So now step by step, I mean, changing.
Yes, and even now I think a new director has been appointed. She's also very proactive. She also wants to even go out for awareness programs, but they need to get their permissions and sort out their politics. But she's being very proactive for the moment. We're working with them. But there are certain instances where it's a small police station. The women and children's desk is in a corner. It's very small. And again, sometimes they have to also do the tea round in the morning, also do the little cleaning up within the police station in the morning. So where then they don't have time to do their work also. But yes, I agree, there is a lot of work being done now.
I want to just add to that, the challenge is sometimes when people undergo emotional, sexual or physical abuse, they sometimes feel very much less confident. So that's one of the challenges. They feel worthless, the psychological reaction. They feel hopeless, or they may become, very depressed. And you'll be surprised to say some of the children who have been psychologically and physically abused even can be stunted. So the behavioral changes, and even if the children doesn't report, teachers should be trained to pick them up when a child visits a doctor, even for a completely unrelated thing. Now, my expertise are on medically unexplained symptoms. Children may come up with physical symptoms without revealing what happened. So they have to be trained to, detect these indirect signs. And certain children can actually get addicted to, drugs and alcohol as well. Sometimes these abused children could be deliberately used by people to continue, their abuse.
Talking to you about it today.
Pushing them for selling drugs and alcohol and things like that. And also, some of these children might become extremely anxious or even depressed. Or sometimes children can go through, forms of post-traumatic stress disorder. So all this has to be taken into account when it comes to, detecting somebody. It's a very difficult thing, and you have to make a lot of reassurance to them before you actually try and dissect.
So what is the problem, Marita, now? If you look at the previous government, they want to establish a special court to prosecute those individuals who have been corrupt and who have swindled money. This government comes into play. They are trying to do the same thing, to establish more courts to ensure that all the processes are streamlined. But when it comes to child rights, child abuse cases, no one is talking about it, unless otherwise there is an issue. And that too, as Professor Atula and Milani said, will die down in the next few weeks and months. Why? Because Sri Lanka forgets quite fast.
Actually, I must commend our present Justice Minister for being committed to a lot of reform, especially around child rights issues. Upon his appointment as Justice Minister, he made a very strong statement on his on child rights, and he determined to set up child courts. And I believe now they finalized with that policy on setting up about 9 different child courts, 1 for each province. So I think there is a lot of reform, as Milani also highlighted. There's a lot of reform happening now in the legal sector.
And we just hope that it sees the light of day.
Yeah, we hope it sees. We really do hope it sees the light of day. But I think we have, after a long time, a justice minister that's quite committed to this kind for social reform, which is quite refreshing. So we just have to hope that it gets implemented and support that institutional change.
When it comes to creating awareness on protecting child rights, something that we see is that, the way you explain issues to a PhD holder, mother, and the way you explain these things to, say, a mother working in the plantation sector is completely different.
Absolutely.
So, do our resource persons are they equipped with the necessary skill sets to make these understand these differences when they go about creating awareness? Professor?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Depending on who the
yeah,
resource people are, no?
Yeah.
Yes.
And how they deliver, where they deliver. So it depends on the resource person itself as well.
And the communities they come from, you know, as also Milani highlighted, it's important to have this sort of protections within the community itself. So these resource persons should be trained for the various communities and districts in Sri Lanka
So
who will be able to
doing
understand
this
that.
program in Putlam, right? So basically what we are trying to do is create the safety network within the community. So we go and teach them, like even things like laws and
Trainers
what
training.
yes, sir. And what departments that people can go to, where you can, you know, and if let's say for example you go to the police station and nothing happens there, or they are biased towards the accused or something, then who do you write to? Who do you go and meet? You know, everything in procedure-wise, order-wise, we are doing within the community, and it was amazing to have the fishermen, the fathers within the fishing villages, the young boys. We had quite a lot of young boys coming in and young girls. So it was more of the fishermen who were coming in and talking to us about the drug issue and how that ultimately results in the sexual violence and so on, domestic violence and everything. And they were very proactive, and it's obviously seen that the public also wants to do something. They want to get involved. It's a lack of knowledge and lack of people who go and train them to have basically a safety network for children within the community itself.
Yeah. To answer to your question, actually that skill set is lacking actually. I mean, I spoke to, you know, a few people before I came. We need more skills trained people, because as you correctly said, even, you know, communication at different levels has to have a specialized skill set. What I know is some of the primary health care workers has been trained to do. Family Health Bureau is also doing certain amount of work, but as you pointed out before, there is lack of collaboration and coordination with different sectors. Although we have, you know, different people attached to AGA's office and all that, they're not working as a full team. So all that is there. So that's why it has to be, you know, skills has to be elevated.
So talking about poverty, we were discussing about this earlier on our show. One of the reasons that estate workers send their children to Colombo or urban areas is because they feel that the children can have a proper meal at these houses. And then as a result of that, what happens? Children are looking after children. So how can you put a stop to this? Because it's all about poverty, isn't it?
Also the same reason why young members of the clergy join the temples, join the clergy, is because of poverty. They don't have money to feed their children. So let me go and give him as a member of the clergy.
So at the end of the day, all this boils down to one direction. The government has to proactively take action. Isn't it, Milani?
Action and monitoring. So the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child once said that they are appalled at the state of monitoring of our child care institutions. And I personally think rightfully so, they should be appalled. It is because there is no monitoring system. For example, the National Child Protection Authority is given full monitoring authority of all children in the country.
Yeah, but if they don't have the resources, if the government doesn't have the funding, how can you do it? Now we're scraping the barrel to get our economy uplifted. We don't have money, our economy is in almost shambles. We are just a few months away probably of announcing a default payment. We are in a dire situation at the moment. So how can you point the finger at the government and say, find the funding, we have to do this, and so on and so forth?
I think we should not give this to one institution. As responsible citizens, we must have, you know, community-based societies, or at least we must get together and see what's happening. So we also sometimes neglect all these things. What we have to do as a senior citizen, so whatever respectable people in this society, must at least give the first information. We should work together.
The problem
that's why you also say give it to NCPA and other things. No, we should work together.
But Professor, it's nice to say, it's nice and flowery to say we should all as a society come together and look after our children. Yes, we should.
So you are also NGO, you are
but
also
we
doing
should
this.
also have institutions
You also
that
do
are
this.
independent,
That's why
that
we are
are well
educating
funded, resourced, and which are accountable. That's very
can
critical
start with the
because without
temples, we can
institutional
start with
support,
the schools, we
social
can start
fabric
with
also
several-
breaks. Social fabric is based on
This is the issue.
institutions.
NCP go there online, NGOs go there online, police go there online.
No, everyone needs to work
Finally,
together.
But Professor Mahaneva, let's be practical now. Let's
Nah,
take
that's
for
why
an
I'm telling,
example.
we have to put it into a practical way. That's why I am
Yeah, but
proposing.
just
You may
because-
not like my proposal. It doesn't matter. But I am telling to general public, we should work together.
Dr. Pratibha, but isn't one of the bigger issues also, like you said, it is something we should try to aspire to achieve, but isn't one of the bigger issues also that some of the progressive decisions that you proposed yourself, it is the temples, it is sometimes even the schools in these rural areas that refuse to, that oppose it, that refuse to follow through.
Now let's see, we are not an individualism culture, no. We are in a collectivism culture.
Correct.
Now we only collect what we get for our opportunity. Other than that, our mindset is not ready to solve a problem in this society. For that, we have to train from the school days, not now. It's too late. Even from the next generation, law should be a subject, child rights, women rights, all we have to put into the curricula. Otherwise, this may not change.
Spoke about the experience that they had with the Think Equal program as well, which was sort of a syllabus designed to address some of these issues. But then you immediately saw the opposition come up to it in the form of a certain minister notorious for promoting was it cinnamon cigarettes, who said that this program is promoting homosexuality, and then that was pretty much the death warrant of that program.
So you have the national education
the issue
Ideally,
is that
that
there is no
minister should-
political.
This is
Exactly.
NIE. No, but this is
They are the
NIE approved program. This is a program designed with the NIE.
Program
Very
that
sad if it's happening. I agree with you. But
And Professor, I agree with you.
NIE
of-
should ideally call in the minister for a meeting and make him read the books. Read it.
Oh no, that he wasn't a
Why-
minister at that
can I
time,
make a
but he was
proposal?
very well aware
All
of what the books contained. But it was a political issue for
can
them.
I make one proposal? If all come and sit round table, this problem can be solved. But we have to forget about from where we are coming, irrespective of positions, NGO, police, or even state. If you can do that, tomorrow we can see a better future. Other than that, Mr. Shamir will say, I am saying this is not reality. No, this is my proposal, sorry.
No, I think the crucial issue is
You all have to support, you are the media. You organize this. You all have to do it. You are a
the
media.
problem is you can
No,
have
but
media, the
Nadim,
bureaucracy,
Nadim,
everyone
I say
coming
no
in.
response.
But
But-
the moment a politician turns it into
No, forget about
something
these
that
politicians.
it's not, it's
Forget
dead.
about these politicians.
But you can't forget about the politicians because at the end of the day,
You
they're
have to
running
change
the
their mind. They should change their mind.
I'll tell you.
You say it
It's
is
very
not-
difficult to change their minds, Dr. Mane.
No,
Can, try it.
that opportunity is created if there is a socially and culturally sensitive issue, whether we like it or not. If you try to take that as the central thing for educational reforms, yes, there would be resistance and opinion. So what we have to do it strategically. Yes, sex education is important, but that is not the core of change of curriculum, life skills, other things. And you have to, because it's a multicultural society.
It's not sex education. This was like
No, I know,
at
but
least
that's a
11.
different.
But it's like
what we
social
have
and
to-
emotional intelligence.
What
you were
we
talking
have to
about before.
understand, certain segments in this society, power brokers, trade unions, and them, they capture on one particular thing and go to towns, right? So, and
saying they have
they
a
create sensationalism. I don't want to talk about the current, student issues, strikes and all that. But what I mean, we have to seriously think of core issues. Educational reforms is a must in this country.
No, but that is what Aditi is also trying to say, Professor. Just because someone doesn't like someone's face, they can't reject a good proposal.
Agree. It
That
has to
shouldn't
have.
happen.
But that's where what Pratibha mentioned is important. Whether we like it or not, it can't just be a slogan. What happens from 5 years to 5 years, people elect people to the parliament.
but we have to be-
And they just,
Professor
they
Atul,
take
we have to
away-
at least
You
be
mentioned a
glad.
very important point. you said you can't necessarily package sex education as sex education given the nature of society. How would you package it?
No, I wouldn't take it as the core issue because
what would you take?
No, my core issues are in the education, training children life skills, right? The children become parents. Wait, let me finish. Emotional intelligence is not necessarily sex education.
And that's the proposal that was turned down.
No, that is, I don't know details about it, but I remember certain strata of the society came up with and made a big cry about it, which is not right. I'm not supporting it. And again, I'm not saying men shouldn't cook at houses. They have to do. Females has to be educated in this country. They should have equal rights to do anything men do, and it's men's responsibility to try and support home things. So that equality has to be there. Gender imbalance cannot be tolerated. So that's perfect. But when it comes to education, this type of, just skill-based, not life skills, looking for a particular profession, that type of education has to change. We need to create educated people for the next century.
Right.
And for that, the whole education system has to be changed based on a wider debate.
But why are these words so taboo? Sex education, so what?
No, because
why can't it be direct?
You and I may agree, but we have to accept that there are people, if you put something sensitive to the front, and if that is shot down, I would be tactful, because to me, sex education is important, but that is not the sole thing in the whole education.
No, Arthur, isn't this the problem in Sri Lanka?
No.
Isn't this the very problem? You try to make the two words taboo. Sex education, no, we don't want to talk about it because
no, it is taboo. It's not a taboo for us.
Yeah, it's not. But culturally, we don't want to talk about it.
No,
now, even the four panelists have divided views on this. Now, I strongly believe that sex education, whatever it may be, has to come to the limelight. People have to know they're learning about this. Now, let's take a look at campuses, Colombo University. They teach about HIV/AIDS only after these students go to the first year university. What about students who are below 18 years old?
It has to be taught by people who have the necessary skills first, right? So unless teachers are trained to deliver it,
that is why we are saying
it can be portrayed in a different way. Now, it's said if a child take a phone and learn some sexual activities, people might say that's not.
But that is how children are learning.
Absolutely, that is wrong.
Learning and practicing.
Yeah. So I mean, it's what I'm trying.
So why aren't we teaching teachers? Why isn't education ministry teaching teachers? Okay, this is how you're going to teach a child comprehensive sexual and relationship education. You need to start it at this age group.
And that's what you name it, comprehensive sexual and relationship education.
But the argument professor saying that is not the core point.
Absolutely.
No, you agree, but it is still something which we have to do.
Even if that is done comprehensively, things are not going to change.
No, but thing is, Professor, now take the individuals in this room at the moment. For us, sex education, probably we believe that this has to be taught at schools. But there is a certain section in society, probably like you, who think, no, it should not be the case. It should be imparted to something else. And as a life learning lesson, it has to be taught. Now, that attitude you can't
No, I don't think
change.
the professor is saying that. No, he agrees that there should be sexual
I didn't say that. What I'm saying is, if the great majority of parents in this country doesn't like, now my children were educated in English. I vividly remember we went for a parent meeting, and some of different cultures, different countries, they were vehemently opposing it, right? So the principal and the teacher said, if you don't want, we wouldn't do it for them. But that sensitivity was there, even in other parts. So we can't impose. What I'm trying to say, if we try to
Why can't we impose? If we're imposing children to learn maths, if we're forcing them to learn science,
children can get abused.
Yeah.
But they
can't learn about it. If we can force all these other things, we can force to teach sexual and reproductive relationship education.
That's opinion, right? That's opinion.
But why is this taboo? Why is science not a taboo? Maths is not a taboo, but sexual and reproductive relationship education is a taboo.
I mean, that has to be taught. Reproduction. Even I remember, I learned when I was O-level student. I'm not saying that, but what I'm trying to say, if people try to equate educational reforms as solely introducing sex education, I disagree with that.
Yeah, nobody-
It's a
Not
big
solely,
package.
not
Yeah.
solely, not
Solely.
solely sex
It can be
education,
part
but
of
a
it.
Yeah,
It
but it
can
needs
be
to be
part of
part
it.
I
I'm
think
not saying
that's
it.
what that
It
was
can
the
be-
first attempt
it
was
can-
the
it can
Hape
be
Hate
part
Putta.
of it.
Not it can, it should be a part.
Yeah, no, it's okay. It should
Yeah.
be part of it. That's fine. But if it becomes the central issue for educational reforms, whether we like it or not, it's not going to go ahead.
Right.
So
Professor
that's what I.
Sumathisala,
So I think,
there's
Professor Athway, if I can just sum up, I think what you're trying to say is that if in the broader public discussion, if sex education, or comprehensive sexual and relationship education is a primary talking point of the broader conversation around education reforms, that because of a regressive public mindset, the entire reform process will be killed.
Now look, he
Is that what
said
you're saying?
if empowering people, the politician doesn't like, it's a fact, that will result in, shooting down, the whole process. So we have, sometimes we have to be strategic to achieve the social changes. What I'm trying to say, the public creating a public opinion, let me finish.
You're trying to work around the regressive public
I mean,
mindset.
no. If there is a challenge, there are different strategies to work it through, right? So as a psychologist, psychiatrist who know how people's brain work, how people think, how people feel, and how people behave, I'm talking about, certain strategies. Now here, that's what I mentioned right at the beginning. If we just talk about sexual abuse as the core issue, while forgetting all the forms of abuse for children, and also forgetting the big scale abuse of women, power abuse, political abuse, we are not addressing the whole issue. We are trying to address a small fraction of the problem. So what I'm trying to say is creating a public awareness
Professor,
and a social movement.
Professor, now is it right, now let's say y'all are the people who are trying to bring in a public discourse on this subject. Y'all want to make sure that there's a movement. Tough decisions have to be taken.
Absolutely.
It's not about pleasing someone and saying, it's there, but we don't want to do it accordingly. Why? Because people might think differently. Isn't that the problem in Sri Lanka? We are trying to please everyone. We don't have to do that.
Okay, can I ask you a question?
We don't have to do
Do
that.
you think if we make sex education compulsory, that will solve all the problems in Sri Lanka?
At least that is a stepping stone.
That's a start.
That is a start.
Professor Sumathisala, just
No, wait, Disha,
I think the start was with that book, the Ape Hate Putta.
Yeah.
But that was shot down.
Shot down. Artha, what are your thoughts on this? Yes.
Popular things, no?
That's
When I was
sensitive,
in school,
difficult
there
things
was a
should
child.
be handled with care. That's what I'm saying.
Slowly and steadily. Once you start, it will move it. Otherwise,
Professor Mahanameva, let's look at the English policy, the single policy in Sri Lanka. When SWRD Bandaranaike brought in the single-only policy in the country as an education policy in the island, what happened as a result of that? People were not exposed to the foreign language. Today, everyone is suffering as a result.
Agree.
Sex education may be the stepping stone for a nation like Sri Lanka to learn. At least that will expose students to know what is happening around them. As Artha said, a good touch, a bad touch could be understood.
So this was
isn't
taught
it?
to me when I was 16 years old. When
I
I
am
was
not
in school,
against
Hans
that.
did
I
a
am
program.
telling strategically, methodologically, you have to commit. Once you
Before all that,
once you place it, it will run. Otherwise, they will shut down.
I'll tell you, before all that, we need to increase our women representation in the parliament. I mean, those are more important social movements.
I don't think that's more important than protecting
No, I
a
mean,
child
okay, not
from
more.
being
That they are
raped.
important more. They are important.
They're
steps
all important.
towards changing all these things, educational reforms, and how things should be done. It's not
No, I
very
think
easy.
Professor Abdullah, what you're looking-
I'm trying to understand where you're coming from when you're talking about strategy and this thing. It seems that what you're suggesting is that the reform process should be slow and subtle.
No, it has to be widely discussed, debated, also involving the public rather than imposing from the top. I may be a so-called expert who knows everything. But unless we know the needs, I mean, I am a researcher, academic. People went and donated things after tsunami. But when people were asked, what do you want? What they said was, we need sanitary pads, right? So unless we ask the needs, get the psychological mindset of people, involve them, explain to them, and engage them, changing things are going to be different.
But Professor Atula, this is a hell of an argument. You know why? When this government came into power, they brought the Port City Bill without having a white paper. Right?
That is a
could have
different
been done.
argument. This is a
No,
different
that could have been brought in.
The Port
No, but that could have been brought
We
in.
will argue that.
No, that could have been brought in.
that's a
all
separate.
in one
No,
stage.
but at the end of the
all
day,
in one stage. You are putting
you don't have to.
politics.
No, but you don't have to sugarcoat.
Now
My
you
point is-
slowly come into the
I mean,
politics.
you're talking about white. No one asked anyone's opinion or permission before they introduced Pythagoras' theorem into maths to force children to study.
Introducing
It's the most
Pythagoras theorem
useless-
is different.
No, but there was no wide consultation for those things.
But
Right?
you
It
don't
was
have to
decided
sugarcoat.
children needs to learn Pythagoras theorem and sine constant. I don't know how that's going to help most of us. It was decided we had to learn it whether we liked it or not. Just like that, I think it's time to stop pandering to these extremists who don't want children to be taught comprehensive sexual and reproductive education. I actually think people who don't want that are the ones probably going and abusing our children.
Probably.
Because it is in their advantage to have children who are not empowered and not educated in this sector. There is no other reason I can think of why you don't want your child to know if someone is abusing you.
Okay.
Right? So since this material is already created by the ministries, this material is available, the teaching books are also available, just teach the goddamn thing.
So then that has to be discussed again, brought to the light, create a wide discussion. I respect what you feel.
We've been
and
discussing
you
this since
hope.
1991.
But you should respect.
But more discussion we need.
I am not just telling you my personal opinion. I told you, I spoke to a lot of people today before I came, right? I discussed
They
about.
must be with this. They must be in the same boat as you are.
No.
So then that is
No.
that won't
No,
count.
I know even
Now we have
about
here
this.
difference of opinion. Arita has a difference of opinion.
Of course. That is the way forward.
even
My views are not the same.
Professor Mahanam.
So I have a right to hold my opinion based on my background, what I learned and also what I spoke of. If people think things should be imposed without, any consultation, for me, education reform, that's again I'm reiterating, education reforms are not necessarily equate to
No,
education.
my point is, Professor, why do you need to sugarcoat it? We have to. Why are we sugarcoating this word now? We are trying to say, no, bring it as part of a curriculum and then have as one part. Let's have sex education a part of it.
Can I answer to your question from what you asked? You asked me, conveying sexual abuse to a PhD holder and a state worker is very different. So you have to pitch things at different levels, right? So similarly, sexual education has to be taught in schools. I totally agree. I'm a scientist, I'm a doctor. But it has to be very carefully planned to suit different ages. People have to be trained how to convey that. And that will help to reduce sexual abuse by increasing sexual awareness and also relationships and all that,
That we are in
coming in a
agreement.
package.
No,
I
that-
totally agree with it.
Now
That's
no
what
one
I'm saying.
disagrees
No,
with
no,
that
no, no.
thought.
That's what I'm saying. But there is a straight in this society, not necessarily extremist groups, innocent parents who may not like it,
Why will they not like it, Professor? Why will
we have to go and
parents-
ask them why they
No,
may
no,
not
because
like it.
you're the one
You're the one who's pointing it out.
posing
Okay, so what I am saying, depending on their understanding, their cultural belief, their religious belief, their fears, their worries.
Yeah, but they're opening up their children for abuse.
If I can,
That's
if I
what
may,
I think what
if I may,
Professor
if I
says
may,
that they don't know.
Yes.
They don't know that they're opening their child for abuse.
Absolutely. So you
right?
have-
But they vehemently oppose
Yeah, because they
sex
don't know.
education.
Yes.
Now they said no, for a nice meal, you send your kid.
Hmm.
But the parents, they don't have any idea whether our kids are going to abuse. But they are like money, good meal, toys, like that. But on the other hand, those people who are doing the abuse also should be educated.
And let's talk about grooming, where children are offered incentives and in exchange they are groomed for sexual activity,
Absolutely.
etc.
Yes.
Let's talk a bit about grooming because I think this is a bit of a new concept. Arita, your thoughts on this aspect of grooming?
I mean, grooming is when, of course, generally an adult sort of induces a child generally to gain certain favors, usually sexual favors. And grooming is usually done over a very lengthy period of time, months to sometimes years. through, you know, sweets, offering compliments, things like that.
I love you. This
Yeah.
is love. We were discussing it on the way. This is what love is. So, you know, and then the child, within a long period of time, gets into that mindset where, okay, he's my lover now.
Yeah. And you need to, of course, you know, I was lucky when I was young, my mother was very specific on teaching me about grooming, good touch, bad touch. You say, if anyone touches you here, there, you know, don't let them touch you. If someone gives you sweet and wants to touch you, don't accept it, don't accept it, don't talk to strangers, all that kind of advice I was given. I was told what sexual abuse was. My school didn't teach me. I didn't see it in the textbooks. But that really made sure that I was you know, really aware of what was going on, and I could identify not just in me, but if it was happening to a friend. And it has happened where when I've seen my friends being groomed or my friend being, you know, being abused, I have stepped in and said, actually, what's happening to you is not right. My mother said that this is wrong. You know, I was able to impart that knowledge. So children are quite powerful beings. You know, children can create a lot of impact and support other children. Sometimes, Milana, when you think of the 5 people you trust, that five could all be children.
Yeah.
Right? Because they are most able to relate to you. And that is why imparting this knowledge even is so critical for children to protect themselves even from these predators who are
I
grooming.
started when mine were 3 years old. The moment they started talking, they can understand what I'm saying. That's when I started.
And the
What do you think?
lifelong impact of the psychological trauma after you undergo abuse as a child
Absolutely.
due to lack of awareness.
But my issue here is we are concentrating on childhood sexual abuse. Say, imagine a child is brought as a child laborer to a house. No physical abuse, no sexual abuse, but emotionally abused. That is equally wrong,
Yeah.
and the impact
Agree.
is. So, what my position here is, we have to discuss about abuse as a whole, child abuse as a whole, whether it's sexual, neglect, physical, emotional, slavery.
No, there is no
And
question
that's
about
a
that.
very important thing. Otherwise, what would happen after this debate is finished after a few months, with things die down,
No,
nobody will talk about anything.
But Professor, now we're talking about this subject, fortunately or unfortunately, because of the recent incident that took place.
And that's reactive.
This girl, no, this,
So
whatever it is.
let's
So
take this as a window of
yeah,
opportunity
yeah, no, but,
to address the bigger issue
yeah.
rather than just
yeah,
concentrating on sexual abuse.
Yeah, no, but what happened here was a daring example of that girl not having the right exposure, because she's been there in the house as a domestic worker for 1 year, and based on the evidence that has come out, she has been sexually
If
abused.
she was not brought as a...
Where was her 5 people? Why wasn't she told that she's being abused? What did she do as a result? She went and committed suicide.
Yeah, she probably knew she was abused, but the whole issue was because of poverty.
No, we
She
can't
was
let
told-
that happen. This should stop. We have to put a stop to it. This shouldn't continue, Professor.
The only
Don't you
way
agree
to
with that?
make a stop to it is to make the public aware.
Absolutely.
From
So-
0 to top.
Yes,
I'm
zero
not only
tolerance.
talking about the
No.
poor people or the underprivileged.
Absolutely.
I'm talking about the bubble in Colombo 7
Yeah.
who think that these things don't exist. Every person needs to be aware. The masses need to be made aware.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Now, this happened at a government minister's house. Can you say the government minister was not aware of the law in the country? You can't. This is happening as we speak.
There are other places also this is happening. in
Absolutely, yes.
Colombo,
Not
right?
just this one minister's house.
One
But
isolated incident.
Yes.
But let's see the West, because our culture also go and work. But if husband and wife, if they can have a harmony life and if they can do their work, why you need domestic servants? Let's see other countries. So those are some of the examples where responsible citizens in this country also to
Absolutely.
get that.
Absolutely.
Yes, we need a work. And the wife said, okay, find out some domestic work and come, then I can have a nice life. So,
I don't think that's justified.
no, I am not
because if you-
justifying.
if-
That is the thinking.
No,
pattern.
my,
I'm thinking-
I agree, but my simple argument is if you have the money to have a domestic aid, you can have a domestic aid. But even if
Underage.
you have the money to have a domestic aid, you should not be thinking, oh, I want to sexually abuse my domestic aid. So this
But
is
still,
not a
what
matter of
about their
power.
education?
No, he's not saying to have a child. He's saying you can have an adult who is there to support you in the home.
Anyway, gentlemen, we are going for a short commercial break. When we come back, it's the final round. It's quite a heated debate. As we all know, it's good to have a public discourse about what's happening, speak about the negatives, speak about the positives. At the end of the day, we want to make sure that we open the eyes of the public to information. You can decide as to what the best way forward is for Sri Lanka as well. We're going for a short commercial break. Tonight, our topic of discussion is child abuse, safeguarding our future. Stay connected, stay with Face the Nation. We will be right back.
COVID-19.
Welcome back. This is Face the Nation, the final round. We start off the final round with Professor Pratibha Mahanamheva, human rights educator.
Actually, we can argue this hours and hours and years, but my philosophy, my thinking is all we take these type of issues when an incident occurs only. So therefore, what we have to do, even today, if we are thinking wisely, we all must get together as an umbrella organization. For this, someone must take the initiation. I mean, media can organize, or even other journalists can come up with their own views and set up a policy. Because every 5 years, Sri Lanka submit a report to Child Right Committee, and 2023, another report to be submitted. So several important reforms they are proposing, like ILO 18 years old. But still, we are stacking in one stage. Even the minister, I think today they are going to propose the child interpretation or the definition for all these type of legislations. We must come 18 years. That's a good sign for Sri Lanka. And also the 16 and 18 years, there is another issue. Even with her consent, anything happen, no action can be taken. So this is where we have to see in the course of things, we have to come for one stand. So my argument, let's see, education is very important, sex education also important, but it should start somewhere. And also it is very important, LGBTIQ rights. So those things are actually just come to the cabinet as a proposal, and thereafter it is not moving. So what we have to do, we will all get together. Different intellectuals are there, different organizations are there. Not to repeat these actions in future, we should come with one slogan: stop child abuse. If everyone, if every parent, if everyone in the society can open their eyes and see what's happening around in their environment, maybe their neighbors, maybe where they live, so you can actually report and get into implementation. Sri Lanka, the only issue, implementation. Laws, I say, yes, we have. But the issue, evidence ordinance, collecting evidence, witnesses giving witness, it will take a long time. So there are a lot of barriers, because 20,000 cases, child abuse cases, when they are going to finish that? For that, you must have a better plan and then implement it.
Thank you
That's
very much.
my argument.
Thank you very much, Professor Pratibha Mahanamheva, human rights educator. We now move our attention to attorney at law, Milani Salpiti Korala, Child Protection Force.
So as Mr. Mahanamaheva was also saying, we do have to write a report. We have to send a report to the Committee on the Rights of the Child every 5 years, and he said there's a report coming up. I think something that we need to understand as a state is sending this report is not to, we're not going to be blamed for anything. We're not going to be reprimanded by the committee. The aim of the committee is to assist the state. So say we write about the problems we're having. Okay, these are the problems we are having. That is when the committee with the rest of the member states will get together to help that particular member state. So I think we have to move away from that mindset of if we tell the real issues that is happening here with us, we will get reprimanded, it's a bad name for our country, and so on. But no, we write a report to get the support of the committee. This is why the Convention on the Rights of the Child was established in the first place. So these are things that state needs to understand. That and also the great need for psychological assessments, like Arita said, criminal records, proper education for the child sector. Like Mr. Mahanamaheva said, there is an umbrella sector, everyone working together. Then to have these people properly educated, including the police force, the probation departments, and also to help them with resources. I am as much as I love to educate myself and research and all that, I'm also a doer, you know. I mean, I think we've had enough seminars, we've had enough talk shows, we've had enough news bulletins and so on. I think now we just need to do. And also a great big responsibility on the media, where victims of abuse or victims of violence don't get victimized again. We call it secondary victimization. So a great big responsibility on media to have a proper code of ethics when they are reporting victims of abuse, victims of violence. I think that will go a long way, and if media can actually start positive reporting.
Thank you very much. Milani, we now move our attention to Professor Atula Sumatipala, Chairman, National Institute of Fundamental Studies.
Yeah, I think my position is actually child abuse has to have zero tolerance, whatever the form of abuse it comes from, in terms whether it's neglected, financial, material, or corporal punishment, emotional, psychological, sexual, modern slavery, organizational or institutional, cyberbullying, ragging, whatever the form, has to have zero tolerance. And my plea to everybody is, while implementing the law without bending it, people need to contribute their mighty to voicing the rights of children and ensure right to basic education. Completely banning, I know it's banned by law, but implementing ban of child labor, and it's right time to implement all these things. But the most important thing to me, have proactive preventive strategies, including educational reforms, rather than reactive steps, concentrating more on reactive measures. My plea to the media, as my colleague said here, yes, you have a big role to play, not to victimize them again, secondary victimization and increasing the stigma. But most, on top of all that, I would like to request you all to continue this debate, not just one-off, over a time period, particularly involving youth, bringing them, having discussions about their positions, because they need to have a voice, and particularly people without a voice if possible. And to create awareness and maintain high vigilance among the society, and not to forget this off after this particular thing died out.
Right, thank you very much, Professor Atula. Arita Vikramasinghe, Quality Director, Equality Director, I Pro Bono.
I think we have a crisis of child abuse in Sri Lanka. And I think it's a crisis that has gone underreported and unreported for a long time. I think now we're talking more about it, maybe for political reasons. I have 7 action points which I want to propose to it's not going to end this crisis, but it'll certainly, I'm confident, will address some of the consequences of this crisis, and also as a prevention to further advancing this crisis. One is, of course, introducing compulsory and comprehensive sexual and relationship education in schools at the earliest for children. 2 is to introduce compulsory emotional intelligence education for children at the earliest. 3 is to introduce child courts in all 9 provinces, and a fast-track process through amendments to our criminal procedure code for child abuse and child rape cases. 4 is to increase funding to the NCPA increase funding to the Women and Children's Bureau and to child probation officers. Today, Sri Lanka is spending more on defense than it actually did during the Civil War. There is no rational reason why we need to be spending more for defense than we did when we were actually in a war fighting. I think a lot of that funding can go to protecting our future generations as opposed to killing each other. 5 is to bring the NCPA under the president in the president's secretariat. This was done during President Chandrika's time when I think the NCPA was its most active. And I think the commitment to children needs to come from the executive itself. 6, we need to provide child protection information through media for children and adults. And 7 is to introduce a sex offenders register, which is publicly accessible.
Right. Thank you very much, Aditya Vikramasinghe, Equality Director, I Pro Bono. Thank you very much, Attorney at Law Milani Salpitikorala. Thank you very much, Professor Atul Sumantipala, along with Professor Pratibha Mahanameheva for joining us this evening on the show. Thank you very much, Attorney at Law Sonali Wanikabaduge, Deshan Gonawala, as well as Nadine Majid. The need of the hour is strong leadership. I leave you tonight with a quote, as I always do, but this time I want to name the person who said this quote as well. That's my late chairman, Mr. R. Rajamahendran. He said, lead, follow, or either get out of the way. So remember, times are tough. Strong leadership is what is needed to this country. Thank you very much. Take care.